So hi everyone, and welcome to this session on how to crack NMAT. I'm assuming that those of you who have joined this session have either already registered for the NMAT or in the process of thinking whether I should take the NMAT or not. Hopefully, by the end of this session, you should have some clarity on how do you go about approaching the test, what has been the trends in the last few years with respect to the difficulty, and what is it that can be expected from NMAT. And then how do you crack a test which is adaptive in nature? So that is going to be the focus of this particular session. Just a little bit about my interest in NMAT over the last several years. So I started appearing for the NMAT around 2020 or 2020 rather, wherein I started looking at the test from a very critical lens, right? So I started also taking the NMAT official mocks that are there, started taking a few of our mocks, etc., just to draw a comparison between the two. And every year, whenever when you look at the NMAT, I am generally the one who does the analysis as well. So I take it every year, typically on the first or the second day itself. Try to take it on the first day itself as much as possible. And over the last few years, I've had considerably good score, I would say. I have had the first time when I took it in the new format, it was I had a 270. Post that, when it became adaptive, I started with a score of 291. Then the following year, I got a 281. Last year, I had a 284. So in all these years that I've taken it, I've generally been in the top 3 or 4 people in terms of the reported scores, sometimes occasionally being the topper of the test. NMAT is a very unique test, and I really like it. As a mentor, I like it. Also, if I had been a student, I would have really liked it as a test because it 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 is something that if you're good at one particular section or you're good at 2 sections, you can do extremely well on the test. At the same time, you also have to understand that it's an adaptive test, which creates a unique challenge, and you have to understand how to play that game. If you do that, then you're on your way to get to a good score. Otherwise, it becomes a little difficult. I mean, last year we also had, I think, one of our student who had done extremely well had a 290 plus or something on the test. It is possible to get to high scores that are 280, 290, and even 300 plus. But to get there, you need to understand what are the things that I must do so that I can crack the test. Okay, so that's going to be the focus of my session today. So agenda is very simple. We'll first talk about the NMAT, what it is like, what is the sectional breakup, the time duration, and all of those things. We'll talk about the nature of the test because it's very different compared to any other test that you're going to face, whether it is CAT or other exams that are out there. We'll talk about the sectionals as to what happened last year and what are the lessons from that as to what sections and what areas I need to focus on. And then we'll get into the overall prep strategy and then talk about IMS resources and then have the Q&A session. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be covering in today's session. So let's first start with the overview of the NMAT, right? Firstly, it's a test which is not conducted by NMIMS, right? So understand that NMAT is separate from NMIMS. NMIMS is an institute, it's a B school. NMAT is a test which is administered by the GMAC. Now, as a test, it can be taken a maximum of 3 times. So during the test window that is there, you can take it up to 3 times, though NMIMS accepts only the first attempt of the test. So whenever you take it, doesn't matter whether you take it in October, November, or December, whichever is your first attempt, that score will be considered by NMIMS. There's a mandatory gap of at least 15 days between 2 attempts. Some of you might be thinking that why should I go for a retake if NMIMS is considering only the first attempt? That is because there are a lot of non-NMIMS institutions who also accept the NMAT score. And some of them might be okay with your second attempt or the third attempt score or the best of the scores that you get, right? And that is precisely the reason why a lot of people also go for a second or a third attempt, because they are targeting some of these institutes. There are 2 modes in which it is administered. You can either go to a test center and take it, or you can take it from home as well in an online proctored format. Now, there are some challenges with respect to the online proctored format, and the main reason why I say there are some challenges is 2 main challenges, I would say, is the electricity and the internet connection, right? So when you're taking it from home, you have to ensure that you have a stable electricity and internet connection, because if during the test, let's say something goes wrong, and your internet goes away, right? And it doesn't come back for, I think it's 30 minutes or something that they say. That if it doesn't come back for 30 minutes, then your attempt goes for a toss, right? Basically, it is gone. So that is the problem with taking it from home. I would encourage people to go to a test center and take it, because it ensures that you're not constantly worried about this, right? So I think in 2020, when they introduced it for the first time, I had taken an online proctor test, but the entire time I was constantly worried whether if my internet goes off, then what happens, right? So I would suggest people to go to a test center and take it as much as possible. I understand that there could be some location constraints, or maybe due to some reasons you're not finding a slot which is at a test center on a convenient date. In that case, you can always go for an online proctored from home kind of an attempt. Just ensure that you have stable electricity and internet connection. Rescheduling is allowed in the same mode, but retake in different mode. So what is rescheduling? Rescheduling is, let's say I've scheduled my attempt for, say, 15th October, and now I think that I'll not be able to take it for some reason, right? So I want to reschedule it, which is changing the date to, let's say, 20th October. So if I've scheduled my attempt in a particular mode, let's say I've scheduled it at a test center, rescheduling is allowed only for a test venue mode, right? I cannot reschedule it to an online proctor if I scheduled my attempt for a test center. However, retake, which means when you are, let's say, schedule your first attempt, now you've taken that attempt, let's say it was from a test center, and now you want to go for a retake, which is your second attempt. Now you want to take it from home, that is allowed. You can do that. So rescheduling is allowed in the same mode. Retake is allowed in different mode as well. Okay. Score is available, first of all, instantaneously. So once you submit the test, the moment you end the test, you see your provisional score. And then within 48 hours, you get your final result as well. And very, very important that the registration for NMAT is different from the registration of NMIMS. Registering for the NMAT is step 1. You have to complete that and then do the NMIMS application process as well, if you want to be considered for NMIMS institutions. And lastly, you pay for each NMAT registration attempt, but pay NMIMS only once. Okay. So if you are taking, let's say, 2 attempts of NMAT, you register for the NMAT first time, you pay for NMAT. You register for NMIMS, you pay for NMIMS. Now, when you are appearing for NMAT again, right? First of all, NMIMS will not consider your second attempt. But let's say you're attempting the NMAT again, that time you don't really have to apply to NMIMS again, because they're not going to consider your second attempt or anything. Okay. So paying for NMAT individually is what you will have to do if you're going for retakes. Okay. Any questions on the NMAT in terms of the structure, or any other questions that you have at this point of time on the scheduling front? What are the deadlines? Okay, so deadlines, first of all, are available on the NMAT website itself. All of you can simply just go to NMAT website and check it out. So there are different dates for when you have to schedule your attempt, when is the last day to register, and all of that. So you can go to the NMAT website and have a look at it. Online exam gives scores at the moment. Yes. So to answer your question, whether it is from home or it is at a test center, the moment you are done with the test, you get your score immediately. Okay. So you don't have to wait to see your results. Okay. If we wish to reschedule and slots are not available, then what can we do? See, with respect to slots, they keep opening slots, but at what frequency they open slots, nobody knows. So the moment you see a slot which is convenient in terms of, let's say, venue convenience or date convenience or whatever that may be, you just book it, right? I would say that if you find a slot wherein you think you will be comfortable taking it, just go ahead and book it, and don't really wait for the ideal slot. All right. Preference of colleges. Okay, all of those details are there in the form filling video. So those of you who have not seen the NMAT form filling guideline video, please have a look at it. We have also published a document in which we have given what preferences you're supposed to put. I will also talk about some of the cutoffs today for the NMIMS campuses at least. And for the other institutes, you can find that information in the form filling guideline document. Now let's talk a little bit about the format. Okay, now we understood how the scheduling and everything works. Specifically, if we talk about the test, the format is this, that there's no negative marking. There is no on-screen calculator. but there are sectional and overall cutoffs that are there. Okay, and that is again specifically I'm saying for NMIMS, because there are a lot of other institutions who might be okay saying we are not looking at sectional cutoffs, we're just looking at the overall score. But when you're thinking of NMIMS and you want to get in, you have to clear the sectional cutoffs that are going to be there. In each of the sections, you have 36 questions. That number is constant. The time duration is different. So for language skills, you have 28 minutes. For quant, you have 52. For LR, you have 40. And you can choose the order in which you want to take the test. So before you start the test, they will ask you in which order you want to attempt these sections. Once you select that, you will not be able to change that order. So you can, for example, decide that I want to take quant first, then language, and then LR. Or somebody else might say, I'm going to take LR first, then quant, then language. You have that freedom about a few minutes before you start the test. Okay. And in both the attempts, whether it is test center or online, this is how it works. You start, you can see the question that what is the order in which you're going to attempt it. You decide that order, you go ahead, and then you can start with the test. Okay, so that's how it works. You cannot jump from one section to another. I mean, you during the test, right? So you have to complete that particular section, then only you can move forward to the next section. Okay. And in terms of time, I would say language is one place where most of the people are able to even complete before 28 minutes. But quant and LR, these are the two sections where people generally find it challenging to complete the entire, the number of questions that are there. There is penalty for not completing it, which I will talk about as we discuss the scoring part of it. Okay. Now, what are the cutoffs like? So if you look at, these are the cutoffs of last year, and the cutoffs may change from year to year. They didn't really change much last year, though there were some places where they significantly changed. But otherwise, last year also, I think, or the year prior also, the NMIMS Mumbai cutoff was around 232. One of the years it was 235. The sectionals can change a little bit here and there. For example, if let's say one particular section, people start scoring on the higher side, you know that the cutoffs are going to go up. Right? So the sectional cutoffs can be different. In some years in the past, for example, quant also has been around 76. But last year, quant was considerably difficult, wherein the cutoff came down to 69. LR was 71, LS was 76. The last few years, I haven't really seen the sectionals going beyond 76 for the core program that is there. So I don't really see a lot of change there, but we'll have to wait and see how the difficulties this year. At least the initial few days, once people start reporting their scores, then we have more clarity in terms of what the sectional cutoffs would be like. But till then, I would say right now, if you are thinking about sectional cutoffs, keep 76 as the number. If you're targeting NMIMS Mumbai core, keep 76 as your target. That minimum, I'm going to target that much. And overall, of course, 232, 235, that has been the range in the last few years. On the upper side, as I said, 280, 290, 300 is possible, but we see very few people reaching those scores. Last year, I think highest was 306, and there was only one person who had that kind of a score. So otherwise, it's very difficult to get into the 280, 290 zone. Okay. With respect to the sectional cutoffs, again, as you see, for colleges such as the NMIMS Navi Mumbai, Hyderabad, rather not Navi Mumbai, because Navi Mumbai saw a significant jump in cutoff last year. Hyderabad and Indore will typically be the least in terms of the core MBA programs. Okay, so Hyderabad and Indore generally on the 200 and 200, 205, 210. That is the range typically for that. Pharmaceutical management, because it's a very specific program, it is much lower. But otherwise, all the core programs, as you see, whether it is Mumbai or Mumbai HR, they are on a higher side. For non-NMIMS institutions such as KJ Somaya, TAPMI, etc., typically the cutoffs are 225 or less than that. And I don't really see that changing too much. Okay. So if you're somebody who's targeting, let's say, a KJ Somaya or a TAPMI, 225 is what you should be targeting, bare minimum. Okay. All right. So let's now talk about the okay, what is marking scheme? Okay, all right, let me go back. So couple of questions on the marking scheme. So marking scheme is, there's no declared marking scheme as such. Okay, so though you see score range between 12 to 120, these are scaled scores, right? These are, you don't really know what exactly is the marking scheme. It's not that you do one question correct, so you're going to get 3 marks, or if you do a question wrong, you're going to get maybe 2 marks or 1 mark or whatever. We don't know any of that. So what happens is they just look at what is the difficulty of the question and whether you got it right or wrong. And basis some complicated mechanism, they decide what is the score of that particular question, right? So there are some questions that even for all we know, we don't know whether everything gets scored also or not. Because if you look at GMAT or GRE, they have questions that are not scored. There could be some questions like that on the test as well. So you never know whether every single question has the same marking scheme or how does it work. No point even trying to figure out what that marking scheme is, right? Because I will share one article with all of you in the chat window. Maybe people can now just click on it and read it later. You don't have to read it right now. This is something that I wrote last year after I had taken the test. And I had also taken the NMAT official mock 1 and official mock 2. And you will see how different scores I have got in those two tests and how different the scaling works. So there's no point getting into what exactly is the marking scheme because nobody has answer to that question. Okay. So somebody had asked per question, how many marks do we get? Nobody knows that. They have never declared that particular thing. Okay. All right. Okay, let's move ahead. We'll of course come back to your questions a little later. So this discussion hopefully will address your queries on the scoring format. So see, number of questions correct into difficulty is your score. That is how you have to look at it. So the more questions I solve correctly and the more difficult questions I solve correctly, I can expect a score on the higher side. There is no predictability that is there. So you cannot say, okay, let me do the first 5 questions correctly, and then maybe even 1 or 2 questions, if they go wrong, then that's okay, right? That's not how it works. You cannot predict this. So the response to a question determines the level of difficulty of the next question. And the score is derived not just from how many questions you answer correctly, but also the difficulty level of those questions. Now, the test, personally, what I found is that it is not truly adaptive. So it's not that every single question, the difficulty level will jump on the higher side if you're getting it correct. But after a few questions, you will start noticing change in the difficulty if you are hitting questions correct. So it's not true adaptive every single question. It's not like I do question 1 correct, so question 2 is more difficult. Question 2 correct, question 3 is more difficult. Question 3 correct, question 4 is more difficult. That's not how it works. But if I do question 1, 2 correctly, maybe third question is similar or slightly more difficult. If I do 3, 4, 5 correctly, maybe the 6th question is slightly more difficult. So the difficulty change is slight. It's not something that you will suddenly notice that difficulty level has gone up. Plus, during the test, it's not your job to sit and figure out, oh, was it more difficult than the previous question or was it easier? Because then it puts you into that zone where you start worrying more about how much you're going to score. So you just have to look at it as a, let the questions come in front of me. I'm going to solve whatever I can. Right? You cannot skip a question. You cannot review it. You cannot come back or change your response to an already attempted question. So I see question 1. The only way I can go to question 2 is by attempting question 1. I cannot skip it. I have to mark something. I might be wrong, but I'll have to mark something and then only I move forward. And once I've gone to question 2, I cannot go back to question 1. So there's no review button, right? You cannot really mark a question and say, okay, I want to come back to this question. There's no such option like that. So once you see a question, you have to mark it then and there itself and move forward, and then you cannot come back. Last year, I remember it happened in quant section with me that in a hurry, I was solving a question. I marked it. I clicked on next. I moved to the next question. Then I realized that I messed up that last question, right? But then these things happen. I mean, you're going fast and you're always, some silly mistakes can always happen. So yeah, at an overall level, if you have attempted a lot of questions and you attempted more difficult questions correctly, you can expect to score on the higher side. Lastly, you'll be penalized if you leave out questions at the end, right? Or if you guess the last bunch of questions randomly, as everything might turn out to be wrong. So see, there is penalty for sure. How much penalty? Nobody knows. GMAC has never revealed that. We've tried asking them these things. All of you guys have the same questions, right? What is the scoring like, and are there experimental questions? What is the penalty for not attempting the entire paper? But they don't give answers to any of those questions. So if, let's say, for example, 36 questions are there in quant and you are able to attempt only 25 questions and the time runs out, you could not mark the last 11 questions, there will be significant penalty that you will get because you have not attempted the entire paper. Okay. How much is that penalty? Nobody knows. Okay. So don't again try to sit and try and figure out what the penalty will be like. It can be very bad. I mean, the score might significantly drop because you have not attempted the entire thing. So the only way to handle this situation is to pace yourself properly. So if you do the simple math, 52 minutes for 36 questions, right? So when you look at it, every 13 minutes, you have to basically attempt 9 questions. So that's the pace at which you are supposed to go. If you're not going at that pace, you can increase your pace and cover it up. But otherwise, you have to ensure that you go through the entire paper and attempt all the questions. Otherwise, the penalty is going to be something that will pull your score down. And you don't want that to happen. Now, answering higher level questions obviously will yield higher score. Right? So the more difficult questions you answer, the better off you're going to be, rather than answering the same number of questions, but the questions that are on the easier side. Avoid going too slow in the beginning. So a lot of times people do this, that they go very, very slow in the beginning, but then they realize that they're running short of time. They try to increase the pace, but for some reason, they're not able to complete the paper. That's why you have to pace yourself properly. Do your simple calculations, right? As I told you, for maths, 52 minutes, 36 questions. So every 13 minutes, I should be done with about 9 questions. Okay? And I'm going to keep a track of my pace. Right? I'm going to see, okay, how much time is left? Am I doing okay? Am I not doing okay? Then increase the speed. Because let's say in quant, for example, you suddenly encounter something which is very challenging. You sit on that question for a very long time. Now you have to go fast on the next question. Otherwise, you'll not be able to cover. So you have to manage your time well, and also don't go unnecessarily fast. I mean, there's no point doing, let's say, 20 questions of quant in 10 minutes, right? Because it's obvious that you will end up making few mistakes in that process. So you have to pace yourself nicely so that you're able to cover from any situation. Okay? So don't go too fast, don't go too slow. That's the advice that I have. And again, don't try to figure out how you're doing on the test, because there's no way to figure that out. A lot of times people sit and try and think, oh, this question was more difficult than that question that I had done, so I think I'm doing okay. Or this question was very easy, so maybe I got the last question wrong. There's no point sitting and figuring that out. Okay. So whatever question you see in front of you, you have to do justice to it, move forward. If you realize that maybe something is taking too much time, just mark and move on, right? Because you can't really sit on a question for a very long time. I'm going to talk about the individual sections now. Before we get there, any questions on the format and scoring and all these things? Are the question numbers mentioned on the test interface, or do we need to count attempts? You'll be able to see it. Okay, so you can see you're on 27 of 36, 31 on 36, and all of that. Is it MCQs? Yeah, everything is multiple choice questions. There are no theta. There's nothing to use. There's no requirement to have your keyboard and stuff, right? So everything is multiple choice question. Is the number of questions constant? Yeah, everybody has the same number of questions. So it's 36 in each of the sections that are there. And the time duration also is same for everybody. So it's not that somebody will get more time for more questions or less questions. How come marking will vary? It is their algorithm, right? So you cannot really say that all questions have the same marking. So a difficult question will have higher impact on your score compared to an easier question. So that can always happen. Okay. Are there any bonus questions? There are no bonus questions as such. I mean, that is factored in the difficulty itself. So if you are seeing more difficult questions, generally a sign that you have done well on the test, right? But then again, you'll not be able to predict what your score is going to be. So last year, for example, I thought that I would done very well on the quant, but the score wasn't that great. I think I forgot how much exactly I had. I think it was some 80 something in the quant section. And but during the test, I was feeling okay about my attempt. It wasn't very bad. But then turned out that the scaling worked pretty. The scaling is was a little severe, I would say, wherein even if you make a few mistakes, that kind of puts a significant penalty on your overall score. Is it easy in October compared to December? Okay, so good question. There's no evidence whatsoever available to prove that sort of theory. Last year, I had gathered a lot of scorecard. I had gathered about 1,000 plus scorecards last year, and there was no conclusion whatsoever in terms of the score. So it's not that the average score in October is higher compared to the average score in December. That's not how it works. In fact, the person who had scored more than me had taken it in December, not in October. So you never know what the difficulty will be like, because it pulls questions from a pool of questions that are available. Do they change that pool over the window? We don't know that. Are the NMAT mocks provided by IMS adaptive? Yes, they are. So the IMS mocks are adaptive in nature. It tries to mimic the NMAT algorithm as much as possible, but then there's no certainty, right? We don't know what the algorithm is. Okay. Is NMAT official guide enough to crack NMAT? So it's a good practice source, I would say. It's not that you have to do it to do well on the test. In fact, I've never done the NMAT official guide. I have seen it and it's a nice source, but it's not that just because you have done the NMAT official guide means you will do well on the test. Are NMAT past year papers available? The exact papers are not available. The only place where you can find the actual NMAT questions is the official guide. Okay, so if you're somebody who is very, very clear on the NMAT and wants to have access to those past questions as well, then you have to look at the NMAT official guide. How many mocks should I take? So roughly 5+ should be sufficient for a lot of people. IMS is offering you 10 mocks of NMAT. So if possible, you can take all 10. And there are the official mock, which is provided by NMAT when you register. It has a re-attempt available, which is a different paper. So you technically have 2 papers there. So 2 mocks of the NMAT official mocks, and then 10 mocks of IMS ideally should be sufficient. If I complete all 36 questions before time, so will it jump to next section or give extra questions? Okay, so if you finish it off, right, in a particular period, and that is let's say you have 28 minutes, I think, for verbal, right? So if you finish all the verbal questions prior to that, then it is possible for you to move to the next section. Okay, you will not get extra questions. So the number of questions will remain the same. So, but then generally it's not possible to finish before time. So I personally haven't seen anybody saying quant I was able to complete well before time. But then I think there is some lag in between when the next section starts, even if you finish early. So I don't remember exactly how that works, but then so last year I remember I had finished my quant and LR as well with I guess 1 minute to go, 1-2 minutes to go generally. So then you can jump to the next section. What is the preference order that I have? Okay, so I do quant first, and I do LR after that, and then I do verbal. So that's the order that I have. That doesn't mean you also have the same order. Can you take a calculator to the test? No, you cannot. Minimum score in mock before I attempt the main test. Okay, so difficult to say, but a 230 to 240, if you're hitting in the mock, I think you are more or less prepared for the test. So I would look at it that way. Taking tests from home have different percentile value compared to center based. No, there's no such thing like that. There's absolutely no difference between the scoring mechanism, whether you take it from home or you take it at a center. All right, now let's talk about the individual sections, because I can see a lot of questions are now related to that. So let's first talk about quant section. Okay. Now, with respect to quant, see the distribution that you see here can be different compared to what you see on the test. Okay. And from year to year, things change. So this is from last year and from the paper that I had appeared for. It is possible that somebody might have fewer questions of one area compared to the other. So don't take this to be like the fact that, okay, this is how it will work. there could be plus or minus here and there in terms of number of questions. So last year, if you look at the 36 questions that appeared on the quant section, this was the breakup: 22 questions of problem solving, 8 questions of data interpretation, which was 2 sets of 4 questions each, and then 6 questions of data sufficiency. Some people had a different breakup. This is the breakup that I had. Now, regarding the topics from which the questions were asked, if you look at modern math is one of the favorite areas of NMAT. So you typically have a lot of questions: progressions, probability, P&C, set theory, logarithms. These are the must-do areas when you look at NMAT as a test. So modern math, if you look at it, there were 8 questions from modern math itself. You cannot say that I'm not good at permutation combination. You will suffer otherwise. So just ensure that you do modern math properly if you're targeting NMAT. Arithmetic is the next dominant area. So, and because arithmetic also appears on data sufficiency, so it's problem solving plus data sufficiency. So SICI, time speed, not time speed distance, because TSD is not there on the test. So NMAT will not ask you time speed distance. Even in the official guide, it's not there. So whatever topics are there in the official guide, only those topics are asked on the test. So that's why there are no questions on time speed distance. SICI, percentage, time and work, ratio, proportion, percentages. These are the other areas under arithmetic. You can expect questions from all of these topics. Okay, but you can conveniently not do time speed distance and you should be fine. Okay. With respect to numbers, there were 3 questions based on number theory and number properties. From algebra, 1 question of quadratic equations and algebraic formulae. Again, something that is always asked on the test. Data interpretation, I had 2 sets. 4 questions on bar chart, 4 on table. The bar chart was ridiculous for me. I absolutely hated the set that I had. I was not able to even understand what was going on. This can happen. So even when you take the official mock, there could be a set wherein you don't even understand what is going on. But either you mark something and move on. That's the only way to move forward, or you sit on it and try to crack it. Okay. So at some point while solving, I realized that it was not going to make any sense sitting on it for a very long time. I took a few calculated guesses and random guesses and I moved forward. Okay. But typically DI set, 1 set can be a little irritating is all I can say at this point of time. Data sufficiency, there were 6 questions and these were the topics from which these questions appeared. Averages, mixtures, SICI, profit loss, progression, numbers. Okay. So math, I would say, if you look at CAT and compare the NMAT difficulty with CAT difficulty, NMAT difficulty is of course on the lower side. So if you have done your CAT preparation very well, you should not find any problem preparing for the quant section of the NMAT. If you're somebody who is exclusively preparing for the NMAT, right, then of course you'll have to stretch yourself and do more difficult questions from your practice exercises and so on to be in a position to crack the NMAT properly. Okay. And for DI, again, having your reciprocals and all those things in place, because it's very, very important. Otherwise, it will be a little difficult for you to crack the DI set setup here. Okay. But otherwise, I would say the breakup can change for you. You have to be ready for whatever comes to in your case. There could be, for example, as we go for the test this year, there could be 3 DI sets. We don't know that. So you have to be mentally ready for that. On the official test, I think you have only 2. So that was a change that happened last year wherein I guess earlier they used to ask more DI questions, but now they have reduced that to only 2 sets. Okay. Yeah, percentages is repeated. Okay, that must be my mistake then. You can consider it to be 4 questions from percentage. Okay. What about geometry? There's no geometry. Okay, so there are no questions that appear from geometry on the NMAT. But now let me ask you a question and you tell me whether it is percentage or whether it is geometry. So there is a rectangle, right? And you increase the length by 10% and you increase the breadth by 20%. What is the impact on the overall area of the rectangle? Is this geometry or is this percentage? Right. So see, they have used geometry as a base to create a percentage question. Right. So technically, even if that question appears, nobody can say, oh, you said that you will not ask geometry question and you asked a geometry question, because you're expecting me to know what area of a rectangle is. Right. So I don't remember a single question wherein a geometry property was asked. So they are not going to ask you that perpendicular to a chord bisects the chord kind of a question, because geometry is not there on the official guide. So geometry questions will not be asked. Don't worry about that. But the very basics, like for example, an area of rectangle, I think you're expected to know all those things. Correct? So that is why don't think that you can leave everything that is there with respect to geometry. On the test, you will not get a geometry question for sure. Okay. But then if something like this, which is more of application of percentage rather than geometry, you should not be saying, oh, you said geometry will not appear, so I didn't do geometry. Okay. What is data sufficiency? Okay, so data sufficiency questions are, there is a statement given, and basically there's a question that something, right? What is this? And there are two statements. You have to decide whether statement 1 is sufficient to answer the question, or statement 2 is sufficient, or you need to combine them, or even if you combine them, you cannot answer the question. If you take a mock, you will see these kind of questions, so you will know how to answer them. I would suggest that you take a mock at the earliest to understand the individual question types that are there. So no geometry, no time split distance. Can we skip DI questions? Will it impact accuracy? See, if you cannot skip the entire thing. Right? I mean, if you do that, of course, it is going to impact your score negatively. Your score will come down if you decide to sort of mark randomly the eight data interpretation questions that will appear. I would suggest you not to do it. And some of it can be like very, very easy as well. So if you're, let's say, not doing that well on the test, you might see a supremely easy DI set. You never know what exactly you will get. I had 2 sets last year, and as I said, the bar chart one was very irritating. The table one was very, very easy. So anybody could have done it. Why can't we see sectional marks on IMS mocks, only aggregate marks? So see, whatever we give you, right, is something that you also get on the final test, right? So that's why you don't really see the accuracy percentage and all those other things, because you are not going to see that on the final test also, right? So you'll not get a few statistics that you are otherwise used to see, but that's okay. I mean, that doesn't matter. Marking wrong answer too quickly will be considered as guess and will be penalized. I don't think they get into how much time you're taking. So if you answer something in 10 seconds versus somebody else answering in 20 seconds, does not really mean that you will get more marks compared to that person. Okay, so that I don't think they go to that level in terms of scoring. It just whether you got it right or not, and what sort of a difficulty it was. Right? How do you compare NMAT with CAT difficulty? NMAT is definitely much easier when you look at the absolute content of it, but that doesn't mean that it is easy to crack. I mean, getting a 280, 290 plus is not easy. You will need fair amount of practice, and your content has to be decent to get there. Let's move to the next section, which is the logical reasoning section. And this is one area where a lot of people struggle because it has a lot of verbal reasoning. So if you look at NMAT, last year breakup was 24 verbal reasoning questions and 12 non-verbal reasoning questions. Now, what is non-verbal reasoning? All your arrangements, input-output questions, and then standalone logical puzzles, numerical puzzles, those kind of questions, right? So if something is coded as this, if something is coded as this, then what will be the code for this, right? Those kind of questions will make an appearance. But these questions are only 12 in number. The entire LR, the rest of it, which is 2/3 of LR, is going to be verbal reasoning. So you have to build your strength in verbal reasoning. You cannot say that I'm not good at verbal reasoning, I'm bad at it, and then expect to get a good score on the overall LR section. Okay. The arrangement, last year, the one that I had was again very easy. Sequential output was also pretty straightforward. Sequential output is input output, wherein there is a machine which is given an input, and there are some steps that are given, and there is an output that is given. You have to crack the underlying logic and then answer questions in the same manner. Till last year, or the year prior rather, there were cases where people had 2 sets of input output. Okay. But last year, didn't really see any report of people saying I got 2 sets. It was just 1 set of input output questions which were asked. Okay. Now, what is verbal reasoning? So everything that people typically hate about the verbal part, which is assumptions, strengthening argument, conclusion, weakening argument, then inference, whatever, right? So all these things, these are like this is one area where people know that typically they're going to have accuracy on the lower side. And that is the area from where maximum number of questions are asked. So that's why you cannot say I hate it. You have to do it, whether you like it or not. So assumption, strong argument, weak argument, course of action, fact, statements, and syllogisms. Okay. Syllogisms are not very, very difficult, and you don't have a lot of syllogism question also. Typically, 2-3 questions is what you will encounter. Okay. But otherwise, critical reasoning, you have to be good at this. It gets irritating. I have taken the test enough number of times, and I know how it feels when you're doing question after question of critical reasoning. It gets irritating. The only way to overcome that is to take more tests. So the more mocks you take, it will become a routine for you, so that you don't get bored by answering verbal reasoning questions. But I know it's going to be a challenge. All right, let's move ahead. Let's go to the language section. Now, language. So last year, 8 questions of RC, which is 2 sets. Earlier, there used to be 3 RCs, but now they have made it 2 RCs only. So last year I had 2 RCs, 4 questions each. It is straightforward to read and handle. Very easy compared to the CAT RCs that you have been solving on the SimCATs. Then parajumbles, pretty straightforward parajumbles. So if you have done your CAT parajumble theory and everything properly, NMAT parajumble should be a cakewalk. Okay. So typically 4 statements or 5 statement kind of parajumbles. Then a lot of questions related to vocab and your grammar and verbal ability in general. So analogies, fill in the blank, including vocab or prepositions, and then spotting the error in the underlined parts. So you have to do your grammar and vocab very well if you're somebody who wants to crack the language part. We have found that people tend to do better on the language section compared to the other sections, which is the quant and the logic section. Could be a function of the difficulty of the section. So language in general is not very difficult area. As I said, a lot of people are able to complete the entire section before the time that is allotted, right? So you're generally able to even finish it within 24-25 minutes. I've rarely seen people say that I could not finish my language section. Okay, but it's possible. Some people are not able to finish it. So you have the keys to go fast, especially on your vocabulary and your grammar and everything. Vocabulary, because either you know the word or you don't. Right? You cannot really sit and gauge what the meaning would be. Of course, you can make that attempt, but in a lot of cases, either you know the meaning or you don't know the meaning. Right? So go fast. Make sure that you are able to finish this entire section, and it's easily possible, I would say, to complete it. Okay. Any questions on? Okay, how long generally the RCs? It's not very long. I would say 4 or 5 paragraphs is what you have, and fairly comfortable to read. I don't think any of the NMATs that I've taken, I've had RCs which were terrible. Okay, so fairly manageable RCs. Do they ask poems? No, they don't. From where can we access official guide of the NMAT? Is it free or do we have to purchase? It's not free. You will have to purchase it. You can do it through the NMAT dashboard itself. For vocab, what should I do? Is IMS material sufficient? So IMS material definitely is something that you should do. And if you do your vocab through that, you will have a sizable vocab. I cannot say whether that will be sufficient or not. See, the reason for that is you never know where they will ask a vocab from. You cannot really do the entire word list that are out there, maybe 2,000, 3,000 words if you start right now. So whatever you can develop organically, and then by reading the word list that IMS has given you, that's the way to go about it. But there will still be words that you come across that you maybe have never encountered previously. So when I took, I think 3 years back, NMAT, I had a word which I still remember, which was indolent. So I didn't know at that point of time what was the meaning of the word indolent. Okay. But while solving, the good thing was it was part of a para completion. And the entire context was about people having sort of a lazy afternoon kind of a thing, right? So I was able to mark the right answer by guessing it. But if you had asked me just like that, what is the meaning of the word indolent, INDOLENT, that time I didn't know what the meaning was. Okay, so it's possible that you have these words that appear on the test which you have never encountered. So the only way is to develop it organically as much as possible by reading, and then do your the material that has been given to you. Okay. When NMAT RC asks meaning out of passage, are the words in bold or we need to find from RCs? I think they make it bold. I think they do it. I don't remember exactly, but even if they don't, you have to be ready for that situation. Okay. Where can I find IMS NMAT mocks on IMS website? I'll show you where to find it. Don't worry. So let's talk about the overall prep strategy now. Okay. How do you prepare? Firstly, devote time to the topics that do not appear on the CAT. See, when you look at your CAT prep, and especially when you look at your quant prep, quant and DI, you have done so much that you don't have to do anything separately for NMAT. Okay, apart from the question type, which is data sufficiency, there isn't anything different that you have to do. Okay, the concepts remain exactly the same. Where you will have to spend more time is, of course, the areas that are not asked on the CAT. Right? So whether it is standalone logic puzzles, right, input-output questions, they are not asked on the CAT. Okay. Then when you look at verbal as an area, a lot of critical reasoning is not asked on the CAT. You are definitely not asked questions related to the vocab questions that are there or grammar questions that are there. So you'll have to spend time on the areas that are not explicitly tested on the CAT. Do not devote time to modules with little weightage in quant, right? So time, speed, distance, for example, is not going to appear. Geometry is not going to appear. So you can completely skip those if you are somebody who is thinking of NMAT as a test. Test taking is very, very important. You cannot get better at NMAT without taking mock tests. It will take you at least the first 2 or 3 mocks. Scores will not be great because you're still getting hang of the test. You're understanding how to handle and pace yourself in a format like this. Okay. It's very different compared to CAT. So that is why you will have to take enough number of tests so that you feel now you know how to take it. Last year's example, right? So I will again share that experience article that I had written on my blog. When I took the official mock, I was not able to complete. I think quant section, I could not even complete the entire thing. I think the last 1 or 2 questions I had to skip. That is something that can happen if you don't take tests for a very long time. Okay. So that is why you have to take as many tests as possible. Another thing is, do not spend too much time on a question if you don't know the logic or you're not confident. So if you see a question on permutation combination, and they can have some really nasty questions of B and C, by the way, on the NMAT. I have seen sometimes some very, very intense questions of B and C. Now, if you're not very good at it, and you think, okay, I'll take maybe 2-3 minutes to solve this, it's better to mark something and move on than waste your time on one particular question. NMAT is a speed test. You have to be good at that. You should ensure that you're able to go through all the questions. At no point, even when you're taking the mocks, there should be a situation where you're like, I could not complete this particular section. Okay. 1 or 2 questions I can understand right now, but as you go closer to your actual test date, you should be completing the entire section. And lastly, your CAT prep or mock score doesn't indicate how you'll do on the NMAT. I've seen a lot of people who do terribly on their SimCATs, but they do very well on the actual NMAT. Okay. So don't worry too much about, don't try to draw any correlation between your SimCAT performance and your NMAT performance. Your NMAT that you have, the IMS mocks that you have, of course, those are important for the NMAT. So how you're doing on these mocks will have implication on how you're doing on the actual NMAT as well. But your SimCATs and NMATs are very, very different. So don't try to relate the two. In terms of IMS resources, now what all things you should definitely do, right? NMAT masterclasses are already going on. These cater to all the topics that are not covered for the CAT. And I'm suggesting all of you to go and do your NMAT masterclasses. If possible, attend these sessions live. If you can't attend it live, you can watch the recording. Okay. All of you have been given access from the backend to, in this particular batch also, the NMAT masterclasses that are there. You go to my IMS, you can find it in the channel section. Okay. Then module 5 of your CAT courseware. So if you were a CAT student and you have done with your module 1, 2, 3, 4, there is module 5 also, which covers a few topics that are tested on the NMAT. So I would suggest that all of you do your module 5. And for module 5, of course, it is something that gets covered as part of your curriculum itself. So wherever you have enrolled at a center, they will deliver it. And we also have a pre-class concept video playlist for module 5. You can go through that as well. The practice exercise video solutions are also there for module 5, so you can go through that as well. Okay. Regarding grammar, there is a pre-class concept video playlist in which there are 12 videos of grammar. You can go through that. That will cover the entire grammar for you. And then 10 mocks that are there. Where do you find these mocks? Go to test, go to NMAT, click on NMAT, and then you'll find the 10 mocks that are there. Okay. So those are the must-do resources for the NMAT. And in addition to this, the only thing that I would suggest is the official mocks. Right? So official mock is something that is closest to the actual NMAT. Okay. So whatever score you get on the official mock, typically it's a good indicator of how you'll do on the test. I've also seen people doing much better than that. So don't take that to be like the absolute limit. Whatever score you get on the official mock, typically you will do better on the actual NMAT. What if I clear NMAT sectional cutoff but still don't get a call? I mean, how will that happen? If you clear sectionals and overall, then you will get a call. If you clear the sectionals but don't clear the overall, then you will not get a call. Test series students, no, test series students do not have access to some of these things. It will depend on which kind of test series program you have enrolled for. Whatever are the program features that are part of the variant for which you have enrolled, you're going to get that. Okay. I, of course, do not have all the variants in front of me right now to tell you that you have access or you don't have access. Please have a look at what variant you have enrolled for and what were the features of that particular variant. Should I start taking NMAT mocks right now or should I take it closer to the date? Okay. So let me answer a few FAQs. I have listed down a few and then let me see if I can cover some of your questions as well. Generally, students have this question, how many attempts should I take? Okay. For NMIMS, it's only going to be the first attempt. But if you're somebody who is thinking of other institutes, you might go for 2 attempts. I don't see any slots right now. Will they open more slots? The answer is yes. But at what frequency? Nobody knows. The moment you see a slot which is convenient, book it. I would strongly suggest people to book a slot as early as possible rather than waiting for ideal slots, because you never know whether there'll be enough slots or not. When should I take it? Should I take it in October, November, or December? Answer is very simple. Whenever you feel adequately prepared. If you think that by October you're going to be prepared, take it in October, finish it off. If you think November is the month or December is the month, you take it. Okay. So when you should take is completely up to you. As long as you're sufficiently prepared, that's fine. How should I prepare for it alongside CAT? The way I would do it is depending on when I'm going to take it. So let's say I'm going to take it in October. If I'm going to take my first attempt in October, I will ensure that I complete all my 10 IMS mocks prior to that. So I'll make a schedule, which is, let's say you have attempt after 30 days. Okay. Every 3 days, I'm going to take a mock. That's how I'm going to look at it. But if it is in November or December, let's say you have 60 days or 70 days, and you have 10 mocks, and every week I'm taking 1 mock of NMAT. So I will just structure it depending on when I have my final attempt. And then I'll back calculate and then decide what my mock schedule is going to be. So the only additional prep that you'll have to do is the non-CAT areas that are asked. That's it. And that is easy to handle during the week. And 1 or 2 mocks during the week, depending on when you're going to take the final test. What if the electricity or internet goes off during the test? That can always happen if you're taking it from home. As I said, they have like a 30-minute window. If it doesn't come back within 30 minutes, then your attempt gets scrapped. So that's why I would strongly suggest people to go for a test when you attempt, where you don't have to worry about these things. But if it is not possible, you can always take it from home. Okay. Will your, I can see a few more questions. Will our mic or camera be on during the NMAT? Yes. When you're taking it from home, proctored, you will have to keep your microphone on. You'll have to keep your camera on. Is it better to take NMAT before CAT or after CAT? There's no answer to that question also. You can take it whenever you want. Okay. See, if you are somebody who thinks that CAT is my primary focus and I don't want to get distracted, then go for your CAT as the first thing and then you take NMAT. But if you think that no, NMAT is something that I want to finish off earlier, you can take it prior. Other students' microphones would be heard. No, you will not be able to hear anybody else. So when you're taking it from home, there is a proctor at the other end and you are there. So the proctor is handling multiple students at a time. Okay. The proctor will, let's say, have maybe 6 or 8 people that he or she is managing at one point of time. You will not be able to see any other aspirant or hear what others are saying. Okay. How similar are NMAT official mocks on the NMAT website and actual NMAT paper? They're pretty similar. Last year, I remember, I think I had something like a 280 plus on the official mock. I ended up getting a 284 on the actual test as well. But on the, I've also seen for a lot of aspirants who do say a 210, 220, 230 on the official mock, who have been able to push to a 230, 240, 250 on the actual NMAT. Because there is also a gap between when you take the official mock and when you actually take the NMAT. When will the NMAT official mock be released? I think it's already there. I don't know if I'm not really logged into my account, but generally when you sign up and make the payment for the NMAT, the first official mock gets released. Would the examiner be taking 360 view of the room in the middle or in the starting to find if there's any disturbance? So I have taken only once from home, and when I took it, that time the proctor had asked me to show a 360 view before the start of the test. The person had even asked me to show under the table if there's whatever, some material or if there's anybody else in the room, all those things. But that was only before the start of the test. Once the test started, the proctor didn't really disturb me at any point of time. I'm planning to take NMAT on 10 December. From when should I start taking mocks? You can start right away also. Just the frequency will be different. So if I'm starting, planning to take it on 10 December, I'm sitting on September right now, September end almost. I have complete 2 months ahead of me. So you can nicely pace yourself. Maybe 1 mock per week should be fine. Should we attempt mock 1 a week before as well, or just revise last week? See, I would say give yourself at least 2 to 3 weeks. So let's say you have your NMAT actual planned in November, let's say 20th November. Then the best time to take your official mock 1 is sometime in October. And then a retake of that sometime in November first week, so that you give yourself another 2 weeks before you go for the actual test. Will I recommend paid mocks provided by NMAT? See, you get enough practice through IMS mocks and the free official mocks that are there. If you think you need more practice, you can go for those 2 paid ones that are there, but they will not give you a significant advantage. So if you've already done 10 mocks of IMS plus 2 the free mocks that are there, I don't think you need to pay for the 2 extra. Okay. One last FAQ, should I take NMAT is the question that a lot of people ask. The answer is yes. Right? And the answer is coming because you have to increase your chance of getting. Right? See, you can always reject a college once you've converted it. You can always say, I'll not go to a particular institute once you have multiple converts. Till that time, you're not in a position to take that call. So I would suggest people to take it. Just see how things work out and then decide whether you want to ultimately join or not. We need to register for NMIMS before our exam date. Absolutely. So please have a look at the form filling document and video that we have made. We have covered all these questions that you guys have been asking. Ideally, right now, you should not be even asking these questions because I'm assuming that you have gone through those videos. If you're not, please go through that video. It's, I think, about 30 minutes, but it will clear all your doubts with respect to scheduling and when to do your NMIMS registration and all of that. So please go through it. There is a video available on YouTube. Yes. In case you're not subscribed to the channel, this is the time to do it. Okay. So officially, I'm done with the session. I don't have a lot to talk about beyond this. Bye, everyone.